Hi, good evening. We are into the fourth day of our wonderful webinar series, and it's really happy to see Dilanthi, one of Sri Lankan, even though we lost her. But still, I know your heart and the body is there in UK, I know, but still your heart and everything is there with Sri Lankans and Sri Lanka. So it's really honored to have you, Dilanthi, here in our fourth day, and we are picking up the numbers. We have reached more than 200 even in the Zoom, and this is just for the audience. I mean, this is going live in Facebook and YouTube now. So anybody who will not be able to join with the Zoom today, they will be able to follow the YouTube and Facebook. This live. Dilanthi, every day we got more than 500 attendees for this particular conference. So that was the strength and the acknowledgement of the hard work done by my team from my end at the University of 𝓵𝓪𝓼. So I think I forgot to welcome my beautiful attendees from all over the world. Yesterday I got to know the Indonesian people. The time is 11 p.m. but they were up and they were lively. Attended our conference and they started asking questions. And from yesterday, Dilanthi, we did a small change. We let people to ask questions live than typing in Q&A. So it was a nice discussion at the end of the day. Nina came and did a nice presentation on urban planning and also climate change. So I'm very sure you will also do a wonderful presentation because I know who you are. So I have no doubt about your work. So even though we are in the fourth day, I think we deserve to give a small introduction about the big project, which all these things were arranged and which allows us to get these international professional top key people who are in the top level of these professional areas. So I think we will play the promotional video, only 3 minutes, so for you to get an idea about our project.
Every year, thousands of projects are submitted by organizations across Europe in order to receive financial support from the Erasmus program. For this reason, the Commission has set up a transparent evaluation process that aims at providing grants for the best projects. Project 𝓵𝓮 is one of the co-funded programs by the Erasmus+. Word 𝓵𝓮 stands for Integrating Education with Consumer Behavior Relevant to Energy Efficiency and Climate Change at the universities of Russia, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. This project, designed after identifying the vital importance of the social and economic development of Russia, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. These regions distinguish education in engineering and engineering trends. We are a team that represents 14 universities from 7 countries, grouped as 4 program countries and 10 partner countries. We as a team ensure a proper geographical and diversity because the built environment practices and necessary solutions differ from region to region. The universities of the partner countries are willing to introduce new adapted modes to the different cycles of the built environment and related study programs. All partner universities will participate in the upgrading of BSc, MSc and PhD study programs. The main objective of Project 𝓵𝓮 is to upgrade the curricula with 16 new harmonized, multidisciplinary, adaptive MOOC modules on environmental protection technology in Russian, Sri Lankan and Bangladesh universities. It is to increase their capacity to continually modernize and enhance the quality and relevance of education of students to the global market. Also, the project will spread and promote awareness in the partner countries related to the European Union policies and best practices of energy efficiency and climate change approach towards Environmental and Energy 2020 targets. Project BECK will consolidate a variety of diverse activities in education quality improvement by delivering extensive distance education programs and a capacity building framework. It will establish an associated network of experts and institutions to continue the knowledge sharing among partner universities.
Well, Beck. Well, personally, I really proud and happy to be a member of this particular Beck team. I'm very sure Dilanthi too. And as I told you at the very beginning, in a way, it's really sad to lose professionals like Dilanthi to this particular country. I mean, we all over and over we talked about losing professionals to this country. This is really beautiful, Dilanthi, beautiful country, beautiful people, but unfortunately, there are few individuals who really ruin the country. So, ultimately, what happens is we lose the top quality academics to this country. But I know still, even though your body is in UK, your mentally, your heart is. I mean, everything is still in Sri Lanka. So I know you well, and my team knows you well. But you really deserve a proper introduction or a formal introduction. So I invite Rizna, over to you to do the formal introduction.
Thank you, sir. Very good evening for our guest speaker, Professor Dilanthi, and panelists and attendees. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction about our guest speaker. So our speaker for today, Professor Dilanthi, is a leading international expert in disaster resilience. Professor Dilanthi Amarathurga holds the chair in disaster risk management at the University of Huddersfield in UK. She is also the head of Global Disaster Resilience Center at University of Huddersfield, and also she has an impressive academic career with over 30 years of experience in the higher education sector, and she got over 400 publications. So not only that, she is a joint chief editor of the International Journal of Disaster Resilience in the Built Environment and the chair of the International Conference on Building Resilience series. She provides expert advice on disaster resilience to local governments and international agencies, including the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. In 2019, she was awarded the prestigious Newton Prize in recognition of her research contributions. She is a member of European Commission and UNDDRRS, European Science and Technology Advisory Group representing in UK. She is also a steering committee member of the Frontiers of Development Program and a fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. She is a fellow and chartered manager of the Chartered Management Institute of UK. Dear Professor Dilanthi, we warmly welcome you to this virtual webinar session. So the platform is over to you, madam.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Angika Harvaturu, and of course your team. You know, I'm absolutely. It's my absolute pleasure to be speaking this morning about this topic. So first of all, I need to thank the team for doing this absolutely wonderful initiative. I think it's what I have heard from participants from other days. It has actually progressed really well. So let me start, let me get the technical side sorted. So let's see. Okay, so right. Okay, can all of you see the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so that is very good. Of course, sort of as Rangika introduced, this talk is on impact of climate change on sustainable development and particularly concentrating on harmonizing climate action with broader sustainable development goals. And as Rangika already introduced, this is actually today's talk is very much part of a series of talks that Rangika and his team has organized as part of the big project funded by the European Commission on some of the very timely topics. So once again, thank you very much for putting this wonderful program together. Of course, I do not want to, I have this slide anyway, to tell people who don't know me who I am. So I consider myself as a scientist in disaster risk reduction and management, but of course, some of the key data. And I come from, I'm attached to University of Huddersfield in the UK, and the roots of our university goes back to 177 years. And we are our university is situated in a really beautiful town called Huddersfield, and of course Rangita and some of the colleagues have visited our university in the past. So we are a kind of a gold rated university. We are very proud about that. Only, if I'm not mistaken, about 45 universities have been rated as gold rated in the UK. So we are one of them. So in setting the scene for today's talk, this is my talk will be actually built around this hypothesis. For example, what I want to emphasize is that while the links between climate change impacts, climate action and sustainable development are widely accepted, I argue that there has been limited structured investigation of synergies and trade-offs. So this actually provides the basis and the rationale for this talk. And also, again, thank you for Rangika for accommodating this very important topic into the program. So of course, as academics and researchers, we like definitions, don't we? So, why not doing the same here also? So climate change, the Met Office in the UK identifies climate change as a large-scale, long-term shift in the planet's weather patterns and average temperatures. This is a very, very brief definition. But of course, there are so many other definitions that we can come across. But these are actually some of them, including very generic ones also. For example, climate change is the change in our weather patterns that are occurring because of an increase in the Earth's average temperature. In very brief terms, we say it as climate change is known as global warming. So this is actually very, very in layperson's terms. And also, the climate change may result from both natural and human causes. I think this is really important for us to reflect on that. Though the human causes appear to be increasingly responsible for climate change over the past few decades, and we'll see what they are. So getting to the causes of climate change, first of all, let's see some examples for natural causes. It can be volcanic eruptions, ocean currents, and solar variations. So these natural causes can lead climate change. But as I highlighted before, what is important is for us to concentrate on man-made issues relating to climate change. And some of the examples I have actually listed them here: greenhouse gases, deforestation, coal mining, burning of fossil fuels, industrial processes, and also certain aspects of agriculture. So these are actually some of the sort of human caused reasons for climate change. I suppose I think a lot of you, I'm sure you have heard the term greenhouse effect. So let's see what greenhouse effect is, and just to sort of get an understanding, because in climate change language and in philosophies, greenhouse effect actually plays a major role. For example, I think, scientists have been aware since the late 1960s of high concentrations of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases such as methane in the atmosphere. Yeah. So, but in the recent decades, though, that the link between greenhouse gases and climate warming has caught the attention of scientists and politicians. We all know that, don't we? With all the sort of noises that we hear about climate change. That is actually the good side of the equation. We have heard that there's a lot of attention on the topic, and as well as the general public. Of course, general public is quite enthusiastic about the topic, and also this well-known term as greenhouse effect. what it is. So you can actually sort of see the diagram to your left-hand side. It actually illustrates the basic process behind the greenhouse effect. I think it is extremely important for us to understand how it works in very simple terms. As the sun's energy hits the earth, as you can see from yellow arrows, some of that energy is absorbed by the earth crust and by the oceans. As we know, about 70% of the earth is actually consists of oceans. And it actually helps to sort of it actually warms the planet. And the rest of the energy is radiated back towards space as energy. So you can actually sort of see some solar radiation is reflected by the earth and to the atmosphere. And then what happens is, while some of this energy does radiate back to the space, some portion is absorbed and re-emitted by water vapor and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. There you go. That is where the problem is. This absorbed energy warms the planet's surface and atmosphere just like a greenhouse. That is why we call it as greenhouse effect. I suppose I think you get a simple idea about this concept. So you can see from the figure, the graph to your right, the global average greenhouse concentrations are on the increase. You can very clearly see that from the graph. So then, getting back to sort of global warming trends, sorry about that. So this particular graph actually provides kind of a snapshot of global warming trends since 1880 until 2020. So you can see very clearly where what the direction of travel has been. For example, the enhanced greenhouse effect by disrupting the Earth's climate equilibrium has led to a warmer world. I think that is what, I'm not telling that, that is actually the NASA is telling that, based on very rigorous research programs. So the global average temperature has increased by around 0.8 centigrade since 1880. That is again based on rigorous research carried out by NASA. While a clear long-term global warming trend is observed, temperature do not rise every single year, and some years show greater temperature changes than others. We all have experienced that, haven't we? We just don't see a direct increase, or there are sort of ups and downs always. These year-to-year fluctuations in temperature are due to natural processes, as we can just imagine, such as the effects of the eruption of large volcanoes, and also other natural impacts. Nevertheless, what is important is 18 of the 19 warmest years in the modern record have occurred from 2000 to 2018. We should not forget that. I will repeat that again. 18 of the 19 warmest years in the recorded history have been occurred from 2000 to 2018. So that is during the very recent past. So getting back to some statistics around trends in greenhouse gases emissions. So again, I very briefly introduced what greenhouse gases are. So I'm hoping that you have a brief idea about it. So the figure to your left actually shows that the total greenhouse gas emissions have increased steadily since 1970. So by looking at the map, you can actually see that, can't you? With trend variations usually explained by changes in economic output. For instance, I think you can see very clearly from the graph the recession between 2008 to 2009. It is clearly visible in the figure. So I hope you can actually see that. decrease in greenhouse gases during that recession period. But getting back to sort of after that, from years 2012 to 2014, global greenhouse gas emissions again slowed down. Especially the carbon dioxide emissions, and remained flat in 2015 and 2016. Again, you can very clearly see that from these diagrams. And this is actually sort of bringing renewed optimism to climate policy discussions, since it may indicate a necessary peak in global greenhouse gas emissions. But I suppose it turned out to be a false hope, in my view. But this decline is partly explained by a slowing down of global economic growth, especially with a decrease in China's economic growth, and also the new energy investments in renewables, in particular solar and wind power in United States, United Kingdom, and in the European Union. So that is why during this period that we could actually see a kind of a little drop in greenhouse gas emissions. Yet, initial data for 2017, that actually demonstrated a bad news. It indicated that greenhouse gas emissions have started to increase again, unfortunately, both globally and in key countries. So you can see in these charts, you can see China, the United States, the European Union, India, the Russian Federation, Japan, and the rest of the world. You can see the trajectory is actually towards increasing the greenhouse gas emissions. So it says, again, the research has found out that the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere have increased by 50% since the Industrial Revolution. And this is quite frightening. I'm sure you will be quite frightened to hear this. This is actually at the highest level in over 3 million years. So you can see what is happening to our atmosphere. Okay, so I wanted to give you a kind of a flavor about what climate change is all about. And now then let's get into a very short discussion on what are the effects of climate change. Of course, like, we know the increase of sea level rise, coastal flooding and erosion, more extreme storms, floods, droughts, heat waves, may lead into food and water insecurity, and also it may lead to migration and conflict. Those are actually the cause and effects of this relationship. So of course, there are lot of things can happen as with climate change, and these are some of the examples. And again, I want to share this. I like this diagram, whereas it highlights some key social and economic impact of climate change. Relocation of whole towns. It has happened. It has happened in the human mankind, and also shrinking productivity of harvest. This is happening everywhere. Prices of basic food items and consumer goods goes up. And also extreme meteorological phenomena, extreme summers and very cold winters. We have started to experience that, haven't we? Diseases will spread due to high temperatures. Fresh water will be in short supply. More wars to gain access to limited resources. These are actually indirect consequences of climate change. And also loss of capacity to work due to heat. Of course, we know what happens when there's for example, in Sri Lankan situation, when there's a power cut, we know what happens in terms of the extent of the productivity. So likewise, this diagram actually very clearly demonstrates the social and economic impact of climate change. If if I want to sort of, this diagram actually shows the impact of climate change across the European regions where I am based in. So you can actually sort of see the overall impact across the Mediterranean region, the continental region, the Atlantic region, and Arctic region, and so on and so forth. So you can see there are sort of the impacts of climate change has been huge, for example. So where I am based, I belong to sort of Atlantic region, and what happens there is increase in heavy precipitation events, increasing in river flow, increased risk of river and coastal flooding, increasing damage risk from winter storms, decrease in energy demand for heating, increase in multiple climate hazards. So this is just one example. So this is actually kind of a snapshot of what is happening in Europe due to climate change. So fast facts. These are actually some of, again, very interesting summary key points about climate change. Climate change will cause, experts say, 250,000 additional deaths per year between 2030 and 2050. It's quite frightening, including 95,000 from childhood undernutrition. So these are actually the fast facts. And also the risk for diarrheal disease, which kills over 500,000 children aged 5 years or younger each year, increase in areas with lack of safe water. So this is another really bad prediction that we have to face with. And the third point is, for every 1 centigrade increase in temperature, suicide rates rise by 7% in the United States and 2.1% in Mexican municipalities, for example. These are just 2 examples that has been stated as a kind of a indirect consequence of increased temperature. So sort of, if you sort of get to the climate change, I'm sure almost all of you might have heard about the climate change agreement, the Paris climate change agreement. So what happened in 2015, of course, there was a unfortunate terrorist attack took place in France, and just 15 days after that attack, France managed to actually bring world leaders together and to call for this Paris climate change summit. So that is actually what happened in 2015. So it was actually due to the concern of the fate of mankind. 196 countries gathered in Paris, just 15 days after this particular terrorist attack, which took place on the 13th of November, 2015. Of course, I'm sure you have seen and you have read the Paris Climate Change Agreement. If you haven't done it, please do so. It is available via the World Wide Web and the United Nations website. Of course, some key points in the agreement, I do not want to spend a lot of time here, but the key points in the agreement actually include differentiation, long-term goals, mitigation, carbon markets, transparency and support, finance, adaptation, and loss of damage. So these are actually, there are major sections written about these key important. For example, we haven't got the time to cover every point in detail, but if I sort of go to long-term goals, for example, what it says is this agreement actually re-emphasizes the goal of keeping average warming below 2 degrees Celsius. So that is actually the long-term goal. So likewise, for each point, there are various clauses. So what are the key outcomes of the Paris climate change agreement? We call it COP21, don't we? So it says to maintain the ambitious 1.5 degree temperature rise limit, and also $100 billion financing, and to be transparent in both measurement and reporting of greenhouse gas emissions, without actually just hiding what you are actually contributing to this the environment, and also the process of capacity building. promoting global cooperation, knowledge and technology transfer. Of course, what Professor Rangika and the team is doing is very much part of that, in terms of global cooperation and the knowledge sharing. And the final key outcome is actually the adaptation, response to already existing impacts of climate change. So these are actually some of the key points, and you can actually see how powerful it has been. So basically, just to sort of conclude about the climate change and the climate change agreements, the UN Paris Agreement actually aims to avoid the worst risk by cutting global carbon dioxide emissions to net zero during the 21st century. That is actually the aim, and that is a huge, ambitious aim, but that is what it is. And achieving this will require a complete transformation of energy generation, industry, infrastructure, and personal behaviors. We all need to remember that. And this is actually one of the core rationale behind the 𝓵 project that was actually put forward to the European Commission, and subsequently that was funded through a very severe competition. So that actually sort of the initial 1/3 of my talk was about climate change. So let's now move on to the sustainable development. Of course, you know, that is actually not a new term. And what happened in 2015, before that we had the Millennium Development Goals, but in 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals came in. What happened was there were over 100 national consultations, about 11 thematic consultations, and several high-level panel reports, and so on and so forth, including 8 intergovernmental negotiation sessions. So what happened was in 2015, the global community got together and put forward this idea of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So what is sustainable development? Of course, we all know what it is, but well, you know, we all are researchers and scientists. We want to mention what the book says and what the most powerful definition is. So I have actually picked up one definition here. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So this is actually quite a common definition, which is very widely used as well. So sustainable development, it is actually a carefully planned strategy to embrace growth while using resources more efficiently, with utmost consideration of immediate and long-term benefits for our planet and the humans who live on it. That is actually the basic concept of what sustainable development is all about. This sums it up for the most part, but as expected, there are many initiatives that must be implemented to back up this crucial global objective. Over the past 2 decades, in particular, economic growth has come at the expense of the environment. We all know that, don't we? I suppose when economic growth has a direct relationship to the impact on the environment. Earth's natural resources have been used in ways that are environmentally inefficient and wasteful, with dangerous consequences such as decreased air quality and overall climate change. Of course, in every country in the world, we can actually provide examples. So in this context, for sustainable development to be achieved, it is crucial to harmonize 3 core elements. What are they? Economic growth, social inclusion, and the environmental protection. To achieve this effective sustainable development, these 3 primary objectives must be applied simultaneously, not one after the other, but simultaneously, interacting with one another in a consistent and a committed effort. So what are the 3 components of sustainable development? The environment, the environmental, social, and economic. Again, you know, I'm sure you have seen this diagram, which is actually is visible everywhere. Sustainable Development Goals. In 2015, the world set a new Sustainable Development Agenda, pledging within the UN to achieve 17 Development Goals. So Sustainable Development Goals consist of 17 goals, and you can see them in this diagram. Again, it is not my intention to go through each one of them, but as a whole to recognize that there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It can be said that Sustainable Development Goals are the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all people and the world by 2030. So this is actually what Sustainable Development Goals are all about. Why are the Sustainable Development Goals required? So of course, the basis for that is, some very unfortunate set of statistics. For example, 7 million children die needlessly each year. 825 million people go to bed hungry every night. And about 1,000 million people have no access to clean drinking water. So these actually provided the basis for the world leaders to come together and to develop this 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. So again, you can sort of see from the diagram to your left, so the Sustainable Development Goals can be actually grouped together under different headings, so under sustainable resource use, social economic development, universal values, basic human needs, and earth preconditions, and the governance and the partnerships. So this is how all the Sustainable Development Goals are coming together to make this planet a better place by 2030 for all of us and for the environment. So that this is actually, there's another way of looking at Sustainable Development Goals. For example, these goals actually stimulate action over the next 15 years, commencing 2015. So we have already actually spent 6 years, which is actually quite scary when you think about it. And we have 9 more years to meet these targets. But the key 5 areas that have acted as the basis for Sustainable Development Goals include people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. And we call it 5 Ps. Yeah? So the entire Sustainable Development Goals actually are linked to these 5 Ps, for example. Having said that, again, monitoring Sustainable Development Goals is not easy. I'm sure, for example, Rangika will be able to sort of provide us with some sort of a snapshot about how it is measured in Sri Lanka, for example. So Sustainable Development Goals, as I said, has 17 goals. It is actually divided into 169 targets, and that is measured via 230 indicators. So you can sort of see it is actually not an easy process. It is complicated, but of course there are countries who have the right systems, are in a position to meet these targets and to demonstrate the progress via these indicators. So what you can see to your bottom right-hand corner is kind of a snapshot of the document which highlights what each goal is all about and the targets and the what the indicators are. So it is actually a long document, but you can see goal 1, end poverty in all its forms everywhere, and then it has tasks and the targets and the indicators. So for each goal you have this description, and in total we are dealing with 169 targets and 230 indicators. Okay, so we discussed about climate change and the sustainable development in isolation, just to sort of get a flavor about what they are. So, but now see, if we sort of take the two together, how will it look like? So climate change is more than just one of the 17 SDGs. So again, as you know, one of the sustainable development goals is climate change, but I argue that climate change is more than just one. And it says, and I think it is fair to say, that it is a threat multiplier with the potential to worsen some of the humanity's greatest challenges, including health, poverty, and hunger. So really speaking, what I want to summarize here is that the climate change is not only one SDG out of the 17, it has a major impact on a lot of other sustainable development goals as well. And I call them SDGs. It's easy for me to say that. So if you sort of go to the specific sustainable development goal linking to climate is actually number 13 out of the 17. So it says, it is a major SDG which has, as I said before, the targets and the indicators. So this particular SDG is to do with strengthening resilience and adaptive capacity to climate related disasters. So there's a major sort of SDG to address the climate action. So you can see through that the direct link between climate action and the sustainable development. So in that sense, I think it is fair to say that there's a dual relationship between climate change and sustainable development. Why do we say that? Because the climate change influences natural and human living conditions and social economic development. On the other hand, the society's priorities on sustainable development influence the greenhouse gas emissions, causing climate change and the vulnerability. So you can actually sort of see it is like the both sides of the same coin. But having said that, the links between climate change and sustainable development are very complex and interactive. So there are challenges in achieving sustainable development and the magnitude of climate change increases. So you can sort of see it is actually sort of like the two sides of the same coin, and we call it as a dual relationship. So the sustainable development and the climate action. Again, I really like this particular paper. You all can read it. It is available. It is available under open access. It is very well written based on rigorous research. So this is kind of a snapshot. You can see the reference there. It is a really good paper. What they have done is they have taken the 17 SDGs, as you can see, and they have mapped all the targets. So you can see these little boxes are the targets. So in total, we said 169. And what they did was they actually sort of mapped the climate action and how it enables and reinforces building prosperous, equal, and peaceful societies, and whether there are synergies or the trade-offs. So you can see the color coding. So for example, so just to sort of give you an example, in my view, it provides a really good foundation for building strong, functioning, and capable institutions. For example, if you take target 17 is partnerships for goals. So it actually sort of very clearly identifies that there are synergies with targets concerning poverty reduction, welfare, jobs, and so on and so forth. So you can sort of see within the 17 goals, it very clearly identifies the impact of climate change, whether there's a trade-off or whether there are any synergies. So I very much recommend that you try and read this paper. It is very, very good. That is why I wanted to include a few slides in summarizing these findings. So again, this is even a better slide. Climate change impacts on sustainable developments. What it does is it highlights the implications of climate change across the diverse range of issues addressed by the SDGs. So you can see the 17 SDGs, and you can see the color coding, the pink, dark pink or red. No, it is not red, is it? No, let's call it dark pink. Evidence of climate change impacts. So you can see the climate change actually has an impact to a lot of targets across all 17 SDGs. So you can actually sort of see that very clearly. But this particular paper argues that the climate change does not have an impact for goal 17, which I have my doubts about. I'd argue that it does as well. But anyway, this is actually, I'm just reporting the findings of this particular research, which very clearly says the direct link between climate change and the sustainable development goals. For example, so if you take sort of okay, so let me take one example. Okay, if you take actually the SDG 3, which is actually the good health and well-being. So if we sort of take that, climate change will affect the achievability of good goals relating to material and physical well-being, such as prosperity and welfare, poverty eradication and employment, food, energy and water availability and health. So in that sense, you can actually sort of see that the 1, 2, 3, 4 targets are highlighted. That means there are direct links between climate change and this particular SDG 3. Likewise, you can actually give a proper explanation to links between each SDG with climate change, as summarized in this slide. And also sort of again, this is actually, I got these points from Climate Change Network in Africa. It highlights some really good points, highlight 4 key points in demonstrating how climate change related to sustainable development, for example. The first one, the impacts of climate change and ill-designed responses to these impacts may derail current sustainable development goals. So that is actually the first one. The second one means the mitigation has the potential to keep these threats as a moderate rather than extreme level. So just to sort of make it kind of bit of controlling behavior there. And the third one, many of the conditions that define vulnerability to climate impacts and the ability to mitigate and adapt to them are firmly rooted in development process. We all know that, don't we? So what the key point here is that the climate change acts as a threat multiplier. And the final point is the climate mitigation and adaptation, if planned and integrated well, have the potential to create opportunities for foster sustainable development. So we really need to be mindful about that fourth point, where we need to be thinking about the full picture rather than parts at a time. And not only climate change has impacts on economy also. For example, climate change threatens not only the economic growth, which is actually the SDG 8, but it will also act as a poverty multiplier by increasing the number of poor people and by making poor people even poorer, which is covered by SDG 1, as well as inequality, SDG 10. So this is another example where I want to demonstrate the link between climate change with the Sustainable Development Goals, whereas this particular point highlights the links between climate change and the economy via 3 Sustainable Development Goals. These are SDG 8, SDG 1, and the SDG 10. So likewise, we can actually write a really good narrative explaining the direct links between climate change and the Sustainable Development Goals. Things even become more complicated when we bring in the disasters into this equation. For example, it is, this particular diagram actually shows the climate change and disasters, the total disaster events by type from 1980 to 1999 versus 2000 to 2019 in the comparison between 2 sets of 19 years. It is very clear from this diagram that a world where the global average temperature in 2019 was about 1.1 centigrade above the pre-industrial period, the impact are being felt in the increasing frequency of extreme weather events. So you can actually sort of see, let's take flooding. From 1980 to 1999, there were 1,389 events. And from 2000 to 2019, it has gone up to 3,254. So most of these disaster types are directly linked to the climate change, unfortunately. So they include heat waves, droughts, flooding, winter storms, hurricanes, and wildfires. So you can actually sort of see the impact of climate change, and these 2 sets of data very clearly demonstrate to us the extent of that problem. when it comes to disaster impacts in terms of reported disasters, the total deaths, and the economic losses, most importantly, you can see the variations between the two system of 19 years. So the economic losses in the early 19 years, it was 1.63 trillion, and that has gone up to $2.97 trillion between 2000 to 2019. So this is actually, it is actually quite an alarming situation. So these numbers, in my view, represent a sharp increase of the number of recorded disasters events by comparison with the previous 20 years. Of course, it is very visible, isn't it? That is why I like, rather than having lot of statements to justify this type of diagrams, actually very clearly give us a kind of a snapshot in understanding what in the current situation is. Then the counting the economic cost. So the economic cost of various disasters very much related to climatic conditions, the storms. 47% of the economic cost, $1.39 trillion, is due to the storms. So you can actually see the variations across different types of disasters, which are caused by, which some of them are caused by climate change. So if that is the case, in order to deal with the climate change, of course, we need to actually think about the disaster risk reduction as well. So disaster risk reduction actually aimed at preventing new and reducing existing disasters, all of which contribute to strengthening resilience and therefore to the achievement of sustainable development. What I want to argue here is that we can't achieve sustainable development and address climate change if we don't deal with disaster risk. I will actually come into that in a minute. So like with the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, disasters also is directly linked with a global agreement. We call it Sendai Framework. That was put forward by the UN in 2015, which is valid for 15 years until 2030. So 187 UN member states adopted the framework. And the most important point is that it goes hand in hand with other 2030 agendas, such as the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals that we just discussed. So the Sendai Framework is actually a global roadmap for reducing human and economic losses as a result of disasters. It has a threefold goal, in my view. What are these goals? Preventing the creation of risk, the reduction of existing risk, and the strengthening of resilience. So I think these points are, you need to, irrespective of where you're coming from, just try and reflect how your countries are dealing with the risk. Unfortunately, in most of the countries, the concentration is on response rather than the prevention of risk. But what the Sendai Framework highlights is that the key goals needs to be built around preventing disasters rather than responding once a disaster occurs. This is a very, very important point that I want to emphasize. So Sustainable Development Goals, what do they mean for disaster risk reduction? For example, 90% of the disasters are climate related. So of course, obviously, there's a direct link between climate change, disasters, and the sustainable development. Disasters actually cut across different aspects and sectors of development. For example, there are 25 targets relating to disaster risk reduction in 10 of 17 SDGs. So you can see the disasters are directly embedded or visible in 10 of the 17 sustainable development goals. And also the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, very actively promotes resilience and DRR as a foundation for sustainable development. It is written in gold. And there are calls for strengthening and capacity of all countries to reduce risk, increase resilience, and adapt to climate change. In that sense, what I want to highlight is that the DRR, or the disaster risk reduction, is critical to achieving the sustainable development goals. So Robert Glaser, he was actually the UN Special Representative for disasters in 2017. He was. In 2017, he actually sort of declared that it is actually inconceivable that we will achieve the SDGs if we don't get a handle on reducing disaster risk, including climate risk. So this actually, in my view, this summarizes the complexity of these issues, the climate change, the sustainable development, and disasters, which actually forms a very much part of the climate impact of climate change. So the links to sustainable development goals. So the achievement of Sendai framework as critical to the achievement of sustainable development goals. So this is actually basically in summary. So if we are to achieve the sustainable development goals, we need to meet the criteria identified in the Sendai framework, because decades of development may be lost in a few minutes due to occurrence of natural or man-made hazards. We know that, don't we? I suppose we can actually pick up a lot of references to illustrate that. So bringing in these three components together to your the top right-hand corner, you can see the climate change adaptation, the sustainable development goals, and the disaster risk reduction. They just actually go hand in hand. So there are actually direct links between disaster risk reduction practices, the climate change, and the sustainable development. So we can't actually take any of these components away from this very complex scenario. So we need to actually see that see that as a kind of a complete package. So in that sense, what is very important is the coherence as the process of joint and integrated policy making. I'm sure, depending on where you're coming from, just reflect. In your country, how do they deal with? Is there a one agency to deal with these three issues? Or there are three agencies who are working in isolation, who haven't got a clue on what each other are doing? I think we all need to reflect on that. So in that sense, I think what is important is building these strategic links and coordinating actions of these three fields is really important. And also we need to remember, a lot of countries simply do not have resources to deal with these three elements in isolation. It is very resource intensive. So because of that, there need to be coherence. I argue that there need to be very strong coherence at very top level of each governments. But the issue is that even though that many governments recognize the value of coherence, they actually struggle to understand what closer horizontal and vertical integration means and how they can do it. So there are major problems. There you go. This is actually quite a good area for us to reflect upon, how we can actually bring these three components together. How we can actually achieve or how we can demonstrate good examples for coherent policy processes under the different agendas. At the moment, they are limited. Of course, that means there's a lot of space for us to continue our conversations about this coherence agenda. So why do we need this integration or the coherence? Of course, if you don't do it, these are some of the repercussions. Duplication of efforts. I'm sure you can actually reflect on this. There are maybe, countries replicating the same issue across three different ministers or departments who deal with climate change, disasters, and the sustainable development goals. There can be duplications of innovations, administrative inefficiencies, because we have to repeat the same thing by different groups. Imbalance in funding, duplication in advocacy, and there can be competition between government departments, and also which might lead to poor communication. So what are the challenges in this integration? Again, this is actually part of these are actually part of the we carried out a major another European funded research project several years ago, and we arrived at these conclusions based on the research that we carried out as part of that project. So some of the challenges, the key point is the chaotic institutional setups, divergent government structures. Again, I don't think that I need to give you any examples. You can reflect on your own settings. Non-allocation of clear roles and responsibilities among institutions, poor communication, and also sort of these portfolios are handled by different ministries. This is happening everywhere, not only in developing country, in developed world as well. This is an example from the UK. So you can sort of see what is happening in the UK is that unavailability of law, which specifically directs to integrate climate change and disaster. So these are actually some of the weaknesses, but since then that has been addressed up to a certain extent. But I just want to share these direct examples from the UK, just to sort of say that it is actually not a developing country, developing world problem. It is, this issue is everywhere. And also there's less capacity and legal mandate for local governance bodies in bringing in these concepts together. So then the other challenge is actually the political priorities. The politicians are more keen on economic development than disasters or the climate change. And also a lot of politicians, they like the media, don't they? And they want, when there's a disaster take place, they really like actually going and actually distributing sort of aid and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that it is not important. It is important, but what is more important is to plan the prevention and the preparedness. So the political priorities need to be correct if we are to promote this integration and the coherence. So in the UK setting, the political will and the motivation. So you can actually sort of see the focus is not on climate change or on the disasters. It is actually on disaster response. There is no political platform to implement a long-term plan or both. So this is actually again a kind of an example from where I live. So the next challenge is actually the funding arrangements. DRR actually attract less funding, and also sort of the major international funds are not suitable for real needs, and also the Paris Agreement on climate change. There is an obligation for developed countries to take the responsibility of providing funding to developed countries to address climate change. So there's actually a mixed picture as far as funding arrangements are concerned. And this is actually an example from the UK. What is happening here is actually the media attention for climate change allows to bring more funding for climate change in the UK, because this, as you can imagine, the media attention for climate change is huge comparing to long-term sustainable development or disasters. So in that sense, the climate change has managed to attract a lot more funding in the UK, mainly due to this reason. And also, in addition, funding is mainly available for disaster response rather than disaster risk reduction. Again, with the charitable donations and so on and so forth, there's a lot of funding available for disaster response rather than towards disaster risk reduction. And the other point is, as far as the policy background are concerned, the policies which support for funding allocations are fragmented, as some legislation applies to the UK, and also it separates, as you know, the UK consists of several other territories, the England, the Wales, Scotland, and the Northern Ireland. So the policy background is not easy to navigate. So it is a bit complicated in that sense. So just to sort of conclude my talk, what I want to emphasize here is that the process links between international commitments on climate change and the sustainable development can be again highlighted in this way. So, there are actually direct relationships and also indirect relationships. So in my view, Harmonizing climate action with broad sustainable development goals will require considerable reform to the policy and governance structures in both domains. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Internationally, in my view, there is a need for new linking strategies and deliberations. For example, which empower countries and other stakeholders to implement relevant climate change and sustainable development commitments in a coherent and mutually reinforcing manner. Underline and in bold those two terms, coherent and a mutually reinforced manner. The range of commitments recognized in the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and also the Sendai framework need national implementation plans and reporting processes, which should be connected together in governance processes as an interlocking whole. I think this is really, really important. They can't actually work in isolation. So what are my concluding remarks? So I managed to actually come up with 5 points here in terms of summarizing the discussion. Climate change is affecting every country on every continent. That is actually not a surprise. It is disrupting national economies and affecting lives. Weather patterns are changing, sea levels are rising, and weather events are becoming more extreme. Again, I gave a lot of examples to justify these points. So the review of relevant evidence suggests, again, I reflected on a lot of most up-to-date research, that the impacts of climate change can undermine achievement of at least the 16 SDGs. But I argue even the 17th one, but at the moment, the solid research suggests that it has an impact on 16 SDGs, while action to address climate change can reinforce all 17 SDGs, but also undermine efforts to achieve at least 12. So you can actually see it demonstrated quite an alarming picture. So the next point that I want to emphasize is understanding of these relationships should be reinforced through interdisciplinary work between academic disciplines and evidence synthesis initiatives. This is actually very important to most of us, to work in a very interdisciplinary manner and to create links between academic, the practice, and the policy. And then the importance of governance processes. The governance processes and structures for climate change and other sustainable development challenges need to be better connected to maximize the legitimacy and effectiveness of action in both domains. This is, again, extremely important. And finally, to conclude, the emergence around the world of coordinated institutions and planning for sustainable development is promising step forward towards that end. Again, sessions that have been organized that I'm privileged to be part of is actually part of that equation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dilanthi. It was so simple, at the same time very informative. I think unless you are a very professional in presenting such, you'll not be able to mesh both, make it simple, and give as much as possible information. So I don't think I have much to do as a moderator, because it was so clear. Well, now the biggest issue, Dilanthi, biggest problem is continue running this particular discussion live. So I wish to announce like we did yesterday. I mean, if anybody wishes, they want to ask questions live, you can raise your hands and we can allow you to talk and have a direct question to Professor Dilanthi. And if you are willing to raise questions live, make sure you make it very simple, and then don't take much time when you are raising your question. So I will keep the forum open for you. Anybody wishes, you can raise your hands, then you can put your questions in. So well, there are a lot of questions came to the Q&A, Dilanthi. Well, I also shocked to hear that the link between climate change with the suicidal cases, and you said in USA, it was increased by 0.7%, I believe.
And
0.7%.
2.1.
Yeah. There were 2-3 questions related to the same point. I think soon after you state that particular point, people started questioning about how you are going to link this. How can you explain how this particular phenomenon, like the climate change, how it is going to affect this particular sad incident, Dilanthi, if you have some points.
I think it is of course it is actually not very linear, Rangita. It is actually very much part of a very complex scenario. But again, as a very simple example, for example, the climate change, droughts and cyclones, which actually sort of damages the livelihood of people, which actually lead them to migrate to other areas, and then they face all the problems under the sun and the moon, such as there's no roof over their heads, no food in the plate. So what do they do? And the families. So really speaking, I think the migration, and then it leads to conflicts. So so we talked about wars and other situations. So really speaking, in a climate change impacted extreme event can actually lead to sort of increased rates of suicides. I think that is actually what it is. And this, I just gave a very simple example. Whereas of course the status of economy and everything else has a role to play as well. But this is actually very much, when you take a country as a whole, that is actually the percentage that they have as identified in demonstrating links between climate change, its results, and the socio-economic conditions of communities. So this is actually quite alarming. That is why I suppose these things are directly linked to Sustainable Development Goals, the Goal 1 in particular. So without addressing one. You have to actually see this bigger picture, really speaking. That is why I very strongly emphasize the term coherence. So I think the countries need to be working together, Rangita, rather than having 3 different entities to deal with these 3 areas. It doesn't work like that. So because everything is very much interconnected, it is complex, but it is easy to, when you see the bigger picture, it is easy to identify the key components rather than actually dealing with them in isolation. And we identified the challenges and the drawbacks in dealing in isolation. So, but you need to bring everything together.
Thanks. And it's more than the direct, there will be a lot of indirect factors which can affect this phenomenon. Well, coherence, I mean, it's very difficult to talk about coherence in a country like Sri Lanka, because it's sometimes not 3-4 organizations, 3-4 institutes. Sometimes they'll not be able to bring 3-4 people together and working on the same goal. It's a nightmare, or rather a dream. So as we promised, I think it's time to, I mean, there are a lot of questions typed on the Q&A, but more than pitching them into the forum, I thought, we will give some chances to talk to Dilanthi directly. So we have one good friend.
I'm very happy. I'm very happy to.
That's
my
so
pleasure.
we have one good old friend, Dilanthi. I think we should allow him to talk. We'll see whether you'll be able to identify his voice.
Okay, who is that?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Veera. We can hear you.
Hi, yes. Right. I think thank you, Dilanthi, for the excellent presentation. But anyway, as you said, this is the suicidal case. I think there's a direct impact on the psychology of the person, of the climate factors, especially the weather factors. So that will lead to the family conflicts, as well as a lot of conflicts will lead into that. So the climate has a very direct relationship on the psychological aspect. Now, I think latest research has been found that how the brain waves and other things be impacted on this thing.
I'm sure, Prof. Veera, because of course, it is actually not my area of expertise, the behavioral scientist, but again, this actually very clearly shows the interdisciplinary nature of the problems that we face. because that is why, we need to have psychologists and all these other expertise we need to have around the table to solve these problems. It doesn't mean that, okay, you are an engineer, you are an architect, you are a medical doctor, you are a historian, you are a sociologist. No, those how should I say, those ways of thinking are dead and gone in my view. I think we really need to be coming around the table to solve common problems. We need to be surrendering our own sort of these egos that we have in our minds and put them aside and to work towards the one common goal. That unfortunately, that is what is not there at the moment, even when we take these three key areas. So, but of course, Veera, I totally agree with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Veera. Thanks
Hello,
to say,
ma'am.
joining with the thing.
Hello, ma'am. I am 𝓚𝓷𝓸𝓀𝓵 from Bangladesh.
Yeah, Amarathurga, yes.
I have one question to ma'am.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Uma, we can hear you. Yes.
Ma'am, I am studying coastal studies and disaster management in my university. I am much interested about know climate change adaptation techniques. Can you kindly say more about climate change adaptation techniques?
All right. Okay. So I need to ask Rangika. Rangika, can you give me another 45 to 1 hour? I think what I will do is, Farooq, I have it is actually it is quite a complex topic to cover, Farooq. But drop me an email. I think I can see your email address. Drop me an email. I have written several papers on that. I will share them with you, and I'm very happy to have a chat with you about the climate change adaptation techniques, because as part of the project that I mentioned during my presentation, we identified several mechanisms to do so, particularly the governance. Just to give you one example, the governance and the coherence is very, very important. So as part of climate change adaptation, you really need to have a proper governance system. So I will definitely sort of share with you the information, Farooq. Just drop me an email. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. Can I get your email address?
Yeah, we will put that into the chat too, Uma. You will be able to get the email address. Don't worry. Thanks, Uma. Well, yeah, Dilanthi, yeah. Sorry. Right. Okay. We will move to the next questions then. The question is more in agriculture. Let me make it very simple. How is the development of agriculture industry impacts on the climate change? Can you guess some points and share with us, Dilanthi?
Sorry, can you repeat that again, please?
How is the development of agriculture impacts on climate change? So that is what asked by
agriculture.
Okay, so I think again the food security and the agriculture and the climate change are directly related. Again, this is actually very much linked to the sustainable consumption and production SDG. Whereas when the production actually, of course, that is why I said the climate change and the sustainable development has this dual role, because in order to once the production increases, what happens to the levels of sort of the natural resources? That decreases, doesn't it? Because the increase of sort of sustainable, we can call it sustainable production, but the production actually needs a lot more natural resources. That actually then it will actually create an imbalance towards the sort of the climate change measurements, and also to some extent towards the greenhouse gas emissions. So that is why I went to the basics of what greenhouse gas emissions are. So in that sense, I think it can actually create a situation. And also unplanned agriculture, we know where it leads to. It leads to droughts, sort of because of the again, I'm not an agriculture specialist, but from the ecosystems and so on and so forth, what I know is that the droughts are actually, you can link droughts to the impact of agriculture. Again, I think Prof. Veera is actually is one of the key experts in Sri Lanka, for example, on that topic. So in that sense, I think identifying links between the sustainable consumption and production, the agriculture, sustainable development goals, and the climate change is very much part of the same equation as far as I can see.
Yeah, Dilanthi, there was another interesting question about the COVID pandemic situation. I mean, we all know that after 2019 December, we are seeing a different world today. I mean, things are changing. The environment is catching up, and we back to our homes, and we are enjoying the family, and also we understand the equal social responsibility. That is what the Sustainable Development Goal in nutshell, that is what it says. So we are into a different world, Dilanthi. The question is, any novel approaches emerged due to the current pandemic situation to mitigate these climate disasters? What is there any sort of a novel approaches on this thing?
I think no, I can't actually, from the top of my head, I can't actually recall anything, because when you take the lines between the climate and the COVID pandemic, I think there's a bit of a gap there, because of course there's no natural hazard in between. So in that sense, from the top of my head, I can't think of a direct relationship, because of course if I sit a comment on that can be quite contentious also, because there's a major WHO investigation is going on the origins of COVID. So perhaps maybe several months down the line we might hear a lot more about it, but at the moment, no, I really do not know. Yeah.
Everybody worried about the vaccination, nothing other than that. But interestingly, nature is picking up. So the things are changing, even though there's no, I mean, the best thing is to mitigate the climate change, to be neutral. So if you can be neutral and be as a human, you just mind your own business, then the nature will recover it back. So
exactly.
That is something we don't have to do anything new. That will automatically happen, I believe. So the best thing, the new development due to the pandemic, maybe that, I mean, you mind your own business and let the nature to recover back. So I think that is happening.
Exactly. So I think rather than actually driving in the fast lane, perhaps we need to get back to the lane one, perhaps, rather than, you know what I mean? I think, I think you're absolutely right. I think, all these things actually, give, allows us the space to reflect on our lives and our consumption patterns and sustainability and so on and so forth, because, the rate that we all operated, I suppose, getting back to end of 2019, beginning of 2020, it is not sustainable. I think this is actually the reaction of the nature to stop down the mankind, to slow down the mankind, in my view. I think it reflects in all possible ways. I think, but again, we in theory, you can explain all these things from sustainable point of view and also from climate change. Like, for example, the classic example is because of the reduction in air travel, what happened to the atmosphere, sort of like, sort of, my God, the improvement is just unbelievable. So you can sort of see that can be actually okay, getting back to that previous question, that can be actually a way of demonstrating the impact of a biological hazard towards climate change and the environment, really, sort of the impact on the air became very, very clean. And for example, in the Sri Lankan context, I was told that you could see, some the northern part of India from some central parts of Sri Lanka, for example. It might not have been the case several months ago, but because of the less pollution of the environment due to less number of aircrafts out there. So I think you can actually generate discussions and links across all these factors if you get into the bottom of it, to be honest with you.
That's true. That's very true. I mean, if I can recall, let's say the Marine Drive. I mean, that is the longest the straight stretch in Sri Lanka, close to the coastline. Some days, I mean, I still can remember when it's a normal day. Even from Bumblebee, you will not be able to see the Kalpiti, these big towers. But now from Vallavath, you will be able to see everything in Kalpiti, and you can enjoy the nature. So the nature is picking up. Everybody will be able to understand this particular phenomenon, because we lost some of the beautiful sceneries and we are picking them back nicely. Dilanthi, well, before that, anybody who wants to ask any direct questions, it's a luxury. I mean, it's a privilege for you are getting to ask a question from Professor Dilanthi. So if anybody wishes to ask any question, then typing in the Q&A, you are most welcome to raise your hands, and we'll be able to allow you to talk. So we have a very sort of a debatable political sort of a question. So it is, I'll read the whole question as it is. Will it be possible in the future to fully sustain economic development in harmony with ecology?
My gosh. Fortunately, I do not want to bring any examples from Sri Lanka, because I really want to, you know what I mean? I do not want to be, you know, I'm a very politically neutral person. So I think that is actually a very difficult question to answer. So I suppose, yeah, I think I need to be mindful on what I say.
So better be silent.
But if it is offline,
be silent and be neutral.
Exactly.
I think Veera is going to tell something.
If Langika, if I can express,
you're free to talk.
It is the question of balance. From the 16th century, I mean, we start with the industrial age. We have ruined the balance between the nature and the physical factors were dominating. And as such, I think the COVID-19 is a result of this one, because the climate, I mean, the entire world is rest on the balance. Always we can find the two extremes. Now, even the Buddhism, what it says that there are always extremes, but try to be in between, in middle. And the Sri Lanka should adopt this philosophy. Even today's discussion about the fertilizer and other things, again, that we are going to the extremes. So that I think there is a good, good opportunity that we have to think that how the nature is always trying to keep the balance. So we have to be the balance with everybody. If we are balancing all things, I think there will be less problems. I just express this.
Thanks, Veera. We will keep, we will reserve our comments safely. So we will take Veera's comment, and we will wind up that particular question. So I saw someone raising the hand. I think I lost the track. Anyway, we'll go to the next question. We have only a few minutes. Yeah, we are reaching the end of the session, but I'm sorry we'll not be able to take all the questions. But we thought like we will select some of these important questions, and we will put that to Professor Dilanthi later. And when she has time, she can respond to us. So we'll be able to include everything into the documentary we are going to prepare on this particular workshop. There will be a small booklet we are going to prepare as a summary of the findings, so that can be shared among everybody. So don't worry. I mean, all your important questions will be well answered by the panelists. Not even today, but the other days we have all the questions and that will be answered later. So I don't know whether I'll be able to say I'm going to take the last question. So we will see, because picking up this number of questions which are picking up is really high today, Dilanthi, because I think you are very much familiar to Sri Lankan. So they want to ask questions, even very sensitive questions, and some are political. So I'm not really picking all these the questions, but I think this is really valid question. So as a person who is more into disaster risk reduction, so I thought like I should ask this particular question from you. I'll read as it is, and it says, please explain what differences are there a government need to be considered in disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. Yeah, Dilanthi.
I think again, I think I don't know. It's a very good question, actually. So I think the first point is actually the governance. I think getting back to the issue that I emphasized during my talk, the coherence. Coherence actually comes with the governance. So it is really important that there's actually sort of, how should I say, there's harmony between these areas. I think it is really important, because at the moment, when these sectors are not talking to each other, it is very difficult. And also there need to be proactive action rather than being reactive. I think the initiative should be prevention and preparedness focused rather than response. I think this is where the main issue is in most of the countries. So you really need to be actually, that is where actually the 2030 agenda is very much geared towards prevention rather than the response. I think this is what it is, and all and first of all, I think, you know, in terms of linking these together, you need to get a really, I think Sendai 4 priorities are the key basis, you know, just very briefly to cover them. First of all, it is really necessary to have a really good understanding on what the risks are. That is where the science plays a major role in understanding what the risks are related to disasters, climate change, and so on and so forth. The second one is actually to have the proper governance structures to absorb these new risks and to address them. Yeah. So, and the third one is actually creating investment decisions. So, where the funding is coming from in order to take these activities. And the fourth one is actually having early warning and build back better. So early warning is very much to do with being prepared. So rather than actually being responding to a disaster, you need to actually take some action to prevent the impact of disasters. For example, nowadays, actually, we face the dual challenges of disasters, Rangika. For example, the COVID and the floods can come together, the COVID and the landslides. And, you know, so you really, it's very, very difficult to actually draw the line between different sectors. So that is why it is actually this coherence is extremely important. So again, you know, these 4 areas, the science plays a major role, governance is administrative structures, then the investment decisions comes from the government. So you can actually sort of see with these 3 areas, the policy, the practice, and the science actually come together. Ultimately, that is the solution that I want to say.
Well, Dilanthi, this is the last question. I think we should answer this particular question, because I mean, otherwise we are doing a real injustice to the topic which we are talking today. Climate change, mitigation, and the adaptation to the changes happening. It's really, really important. The question is, how can we measure the success rate of climate change adaptation practices? Is there a way, Dilanthi? So that is my last question.
Of course, there are. I think there are various actually tools and techniques to do that. Again, I think in my view, the very, very simple technique is actually the public engagement. Rangika, and you do that to some extent, I suppose, you know, rather than actually having very complicated tools. And I do not believe in very complicated tools and techniques, because you need to invest a lot more time and effort and resources in developing those techniques. But I suppose the statistics are to increase in production, the consumption, and also sort of the getting opinion of people, you know, from the social and the economic side of that. I think those are some of the very basic indicators that we can refer to. But we shouldn't actually forget, getting back to the Sustainable Development Goals. The goal 16 is on climate change, and it has, if I can recall correctly, 17 targets and 26 indicators. So the indicators are being defined. So from the top of my head, I can't remember what they are, but they all are there. So they are very actually flexible, and then we should be able to actually use them to demonstrate the success. And that is why one of the key components of the Paris Agreement is that the developed countries should report their progress via these indicators once in every 2 years, and developing world should take effort. So that's the difference between the two. But in my view, I should have, you know, it should have been should to both groups. But with that little levy, unfortunately, a lot of developing countries do not report these. So that is the negative side of it. But the Sustainable Development Goals have targets and tasks, so they can be used to measure.
Well, Dilanthi, for anything, there are a lot of indicators where we can measure the success of any event. So if you take this particular workshop, the success can be measured in terms of the number of attendees. So I think in that context, we were so happy to say that every day we got more than 500 attendees in here and social media. So that is a success. In your end, if I have to say that you are a successful presenter and the presentation was really, really successful, that can be measured by keeping the same audience at from the start to the end. So with that, I mean, I could say you are really, really successful. And more than that, you can read the comments from the attendees. I'm very sure you'll not be able to read all the
but I think I'm humbled, actually, to be honest with you, Rangika. Of course, I'm living here in the UK for last 24 years, 25 years, but as you know, my heart and soul is still very much Sri Lanka. But but of course, so I think it's very much, it's absolutely fantastic and lovely to sort of see people like you, and then rather than actually of course you always sort of hear the negativity, but to see the positive energy and to sort of see this type of activities and the enthusiasm of participants is really great. And I suppose this is, again, I think this is one of the positives of the COVID pandemic, in my view, getting into this type of discussions, and it is not difficult to organize. It is very cost effective, and then but imagine, like, if I take a flight to come to Sri Lanka to do this talk, I will be damaging the climate, and then spending a lot of money, effort, energy, everything. But it's just, I'm sitting in my home office, and then just talking to you. So I think let's be positive, and then thank you very much for the comments. I'm very humbled. At least I think if I manage to do justice to the topic that you suggested, and justice to the invitation that you extended to me, that is what I want. Thank you very much, Rangika.
That is over and above, Dilanthi. So once again, thank you very much, Dilanthi, for the nice and great presentation. So let me take 1 minute to explain or introduce or give a small summary on what is going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow, our presenter is Professor Ala Mazina from Russia or St. Petersburg, and she's going to talk about European Union and Russian Federation education for sustainable development. So we always talk about creating knowledge. I mean, everybody, yesterday also I repeat the same thing. So we have knowledge, we have a lot of knowledge with us, but unfortunately we are not really disseminating them, and we are not sharing. So tomorrow presentation is more on education and how we can use this particular educational platform to gear up this sustainable development and mitigate this climate change. So that will be tomorrow's the topic, and the presenter will be Professor Ala from St. Petersburg University, Russia. So I hope all of you will attend tomorrow as well. So anybody who wants to come fresh, you still can log in or rather register using the link provided. And if anybody if you feel that you want to share this particular webinar with your friends, you are free to do that. So with that small remark, once again, I'm thanking Professor Dilanthi for accepting our invitation and giving a nice piece of presentation with very, very informative facts. So, and the attendees, thank you very much for being with us for the 4th day, and see you tomorrow as well. Thank you very much and good night.
Okay, bye, good night.
Bye.
Hello, Dilanthi ma'am. Hello.
Yes?
Yeah, Oma, yes. We are not going to end until you finish.
Ma'am, I am sending messages you by LinkedIn account.
All right, okay, I will check tonight. All right, thank you very much. Okay.
So we are creating a lot of new contacts. So thanks, Uma. We will keep in touch. Okay.
All right, okay, bye-bye.
Okay, good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.